Good Tuesday evening, everybody out there. I'm meteorologist Zach Cordella. Did an update this morning, and we've kind of gone throughout the day today, got new information in, and we have a lot to talk about. But I just want to kind of reiterate a few points here. We're not talking about Tropical Storm Harvey just yet. We're not talking about Tropical Depression Harvey either. And the reason why it would be a Tropical Depression Harvey, it would have a name. Usually they don't have a name when they're tropical depressions, is because this is the remnants. The Harvey already developed. It weakened, and now it's likely to redevelop as we go over the next few days. But just a few points I want to point out here. One thing is, when we start talking about models are producing something, okay, and people don't seem to react. That's just human nature. You want to see it for yourself. So let me get right to the picture and show you that here's the latest satellite image. No, this is not a massive hurricane that's moving into the Gulf of Mexico. No, it's actually not even a tropical system right now moving into the Gulf of Mexico. But you're finally starting to see this thing sort of get its act together. We have a lot of convection. When I mean convection, that's the thunderstorm activity. That's those heavy rain bands. We have it stretching all the way from the Yucatan Channel up into the central Gulf, and it's almost already making its way onto portions of the Louisiana coastline. And some of that stuff's going to start to move in. As we go into Wednesday, Thursday, rain chances are quickly going to go up across the northern Gulf Coast as this thing sort of slides off to the north and west into like farther portions into the Gulf of Mexico. Some of those rain bands are going to start to move into the northern Gulf Coast. So expect some heavy rainfall the next few days, but that's just the beginning. Second point I want to make here, I'm talking about, first thing is people aren't seeing anything. They're not seeing a big storm developing, so why do we trust these models? Well, when the models all start to say the same thing, you start to kind of pay attention as meteorologists. The second thing I want to point out is we're not talking about a storm that's just going to move inland, be gone, and this is going to be over with by the end of the weekend. This could potentially be a long duration event. We're talking maybe even a week long, and I'm going to show you why some of the models are painting sort of that grave picture of, yeah, we might be dealing with Harvey for a very long time, not just in the short term, but also in the long term as well. Let me give you a close-in picture of what is the circulation of the storm, and it's just now about to move off the northwestern coast of the Yucatan. It's somewhere right there. You see, that's where the best turning is, and it's amazing to see something like this there. Right when this thing touches the water, the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, the bubbles start building up in the atmosphere. All of these little bubbles that you see, that is the clouds building up into the atmosphere. Visible satellite allows us to see that. Now, the Yucatan, this portion of land, is very flat, so it's almost like you're riding over open water, and you're still getting the moisture from all sides of the Yucatan. That's why many storms, they don't really weaken when they move over the Yucatan, and when they're already weak, when they're really not even developed like this one is, you really don't see a change. But once this thing moves offshore later tonight, really it's almost offshore now, that's when we're expecting things to kind of build up. And don't be surprised if we see an upgrade to Tropical Depression Harvey or Tropical Storm Harvey within the next, say, 12 to 24 hours. Maybe as early as late tonight. Most likely sometime on your day, on your Wednesday, that's when we're going to see that upgrade. And then that'll produce our first track, our first National Hurricane Center track that's going to show sort of that cone of error that everybody pays attention. This is a different perspective. This is a water vapor imagery. This is looking up in the upper levels of the atmosphere. Couple of things I want to show you here. You see this big spin off the Louisiana coastline? That's a big upper low. That is still shearing the tops of these storms to the north. That is also what keeps drawing this low pressure area farther and farther north, because that low pressure is going to try and follow these little convective bursts. And so the more the convective bursts get blown off to the north, the more that low pressure gets kind of sucked farther north. And that's why we're dealing with a storm moving more northerly than we were, say, a few days ago. We're saying, hey, this thing's going to be staying down here. No worries for the Gulf Coast. Well, this little upper low, which models struggle to really figure these upper level lows out, but when they do, a lot of times they draw that center a little bit farther north. And I think that's probably the biggest kicker as to why we've seen the models jump so far north. Let me show you the models. I know we talked about, I'm going to show you a couple of models, but first I'm going to show you the spaghetti plots. Everybody loves to see the spaghetti plots. It's sort of the thing to see. This is when we take all the model runs, we put them as a line, and we put them all on the same graph. And there's a few things that you need to kind of draw your attention to. If you're a resident of Texas, it's pretty clear that this storm is going to be a Texas storm. Will it be a tropical storm when it makes landfall? Will it be a hurricane? That is sort of up in the air right now. But you see where they're plotting the center, sort of in the right area, because we saw where the circulation was moving right off the northwest. And I'm kind of in front of the graphic here. but it has the general idea. Yeah, this could shift a little bit, but this is pretty clear that within 72 hours, probably on Friday sometime, that's when we might see a landfall somewhere near Corpus Christi, maybe just north of Corpus Christi, Matagorda Bay. And I'd say Galveston might be stretching it to the north, but remember, hurricane is not just a little point on a map. It's not one of these lines. It's got far-reaching impacts. And on the right side of it, that's where the worst of the weather is. And I say hurricane. We're not saying this is going to be a hurricane at the time. There is the potential it can be, but with any type of tropical system, it's this right side that we worry about. Number one, it piles up the water. Louisiana doesn't like that because with any kind of storm, whether it's weak or strong, piles up the water along our coast, and that causes us problems. In addition, the heavy rain bands are predominantly on this side, and that's why I'm concerned. I'm concerned for Texas residents because this is probably going to be a storm for you, with wind, with rain. Some of that rain could be very heavy as well. I'm concerned about Louisiana, not so much for the wind, but for the piling up of the water along the coast and for the potential for some significant rainfall. Both Southeast Texas and Louisiana, significant rainfall. That's kind of the thing that you're going to have to throw in your mind here. We could be talking multiple inches, maybe even multiple feet. And there's a few reasons why for that. Here's one of the reasons. Notice once it moves inland, let me get rid of all the scribble scratch. It doesn't just keep going into northern Texas. I'm going to erase that line because I don't want to confuse it. It stops right here, and then it starts coming back south, possibly moving back into the Gulf. That's 144. That's 144 hours. 168. That's a week from now. That's why I say we could be dealing with this for the long haul. It will make landfall sometime Friday, possibly not even getting out of our hair until sometime to the middle to end of next week. Let me show you what I mean. We look at two main models as meteorologists. You know, we could put all these model plots on there, but really there's two main models we look at. It's the GFS and it's the European. Here's the GFS. I've scooted it along a little bit quicker just so I'm not bogging you down in the details in the short term. But here we go. As we go into your day, this is jumping to Thursday. This is not tomorrow. This is Thursday. Storm starting to organize. Same idea. It's moving towards the Texas coastline. That's why we're pretty certain this is going to be some type of Texas storm. And most models are trying to strengthen this upon approach. So there's a major difference between a storm that's weakening when it's approaching the coastline and a storm that's strengthening. This one looks like it'll be strengthening as it approaches the coast, and we'll be very close to that either strong tropical storm, maybe making that jump to a hurricane. The environment in the Western Gulf will be very favorable for development. So that's why we're thinking this thing could be strengthening pretty quickly as it approaches the coastline. It's just a matter of how much time does it take to get itself together once it gets off the Yucatan later on tonight. One other thing I want to draw your attention to here is this is when it's making landfall. This is sometime, say, I would say Friday morning into Friday afternoon. That's when we possibly could see a landfall somewhere around that Matagorda Bay, Corpus Christi, Texas area. See this little guy over Louisiana? I know I have a lot of viewers, and basically Louisiana is my home state, so that's why I'm going to draw a lot of attention to that. You see, there's this band. There's always one band that sets up with these storms off to the east of the circulation, and that's a band that usually produces the heaviest rain out of the whole system. And so that's what we're watching for in Louisiana, but that's not totally the end. Remember how I said it's going to move inland now? Okay, so now we're getting into Saturday. It's moving inland. Very heavy rainfall, very strong winds moving into portions of southeast Texas. Galveston, this is including the Houston metropolitan area. We're talking about very heavy rain for them. Still some bands over Louisiana. Where those bands sets up, that's kind of, I can't tell you that right now, but the idea is there. But watch what happens. Same thing as the little model plots I showed you before. The GFS as we go into Monday, Tuesday, okay? And then it's finally dropping southeast. Look at the heavy rain stretching from Houston through Louisiana, and then here it goes, moving offshore. Very heavy rainfall falling all along the southeast Texas coastline, southwest Louisiana, southeast Louisiana, and then it actually, in fact, strengthens it once it moves offshore and sort of scoots it into portions of southwest and south central Louisiana. You get the idea. That's a bunch to kind of handle. As far as meteorologists, it's a bunch to kind of handle for us because it's doing this loop-de-loos. The fact of the matter is it's probably going to stall. When it tries to do the little loop-de-loos, that means the storm is going to stall. A stalling tropical system can produce a lot of rain. Bring you back to August 2016. Every Louisiana resident remembers August 2016. Last August, that was not a named tropical system, but it was a tropical system in nature. And it was stalled, and we know what happened. That is the kind of flooding that we could possibly be talking about, at least in some isolated areas. They're never going to compare to an event like that. But when you have a stalled tropical system, the red flag goes up as a meteorologist. And for you at home, it should. Red flag is, whoa, a lot of rain could be coming. Where, we don't know. But we do know the signals are there that this is going to be a huge rain producer. And especially, mainly for Louisiana, will the rain be the bigger threat. For Texas, it'll be a wind/rain event. For Louisiana, not so worried about the wind. It's going to be the surge building up that water. Because remember, if that storm's sitting over southeast Texas, that water's just going to keep, that southerly wind's going to keep blowing that water into the Louisiana coastline. In addition, it's going to be a big rain threat for portions of Louisiana as well. European, one of our best models that we look at, same story. Scoots it inland as we go into the day on Friday. This is Saturday morning. As we go into Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning. It's a little bit farther west, which would be good for Louisiana because that little band, remember that band, that far eastern band that we're talking about? It might be more so pushed closer to the Sabine River, but it does the same thing. It backs it up as we go into Monday, and then Tuesday, here it comes, back over the Gulf, strengthens a little bit, and where does it end up? Back in Louisiana. So that's how many days? From Friday through next Wednesday, we're talking about 6 days there that we could be having heavy rainfall across Texas and Louisiana, and that's really the big story, I think, right now, because we don't really know how strong this is going to be when it actually impacts land in Texas. So it could easily strengthen quickly as it moves into Texas. But again, Texas, I think you need to start. If you're a resident of Texas, you need to start preparing for some type of tropical system. You know the story, you know the drill. You've been through this many times if you're a resident of Texas, just like Louisiana residents have been through it many times. Louisiana, it's not so much that original impact, it's what happens with that storm afterwards. It does that stall and then starts scooting closer to us. The heavy rain threat is going to be tremendous, unfortunately, for portions of southeast Texas, southwest Louisiana, and really all of South Louisiana. We're going to be watching that very closely because that, I think, is the bigger threat right now. Or what the computer models are throwing out there, almost everyone is throwing out there multiple inches, maybe even over a foot of rain in many spots in portions of Texas and Louisiana. So that is what kind of the highlight I'm going to go with tonight. We don't really, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, this is going to become a big storm or anything like that. But it's the flood potential. I think that's the biggest red flag as meteorologists see in these models. It's the flood potential that kind of has us worried. And should you be worried at home? No. You should continue to just monitor things. We have a few days to kind of prepare for this, but we'll see how this plays out. Once it gets organized, and then once it gets in the Gulf, that's later tonight, probably going to organize on Wednesday, we should get to know a little bit more. And at that point, we can kind of start determining impacts to certain areas. Right now, it's just, okay, Texas and Louisiana. Once we get maybe a day or so into this, maybe tomorrow into Thursday, we could start to talk about specific impacts for certain areas like southeast Louisiana, south central, the southwest Louisiana, southeast Texas. You kind of get the drift that I'm going with. But I'm meteorologist Zach Fidello on this Tuesday evening. I know I went long, but there's a lot to talk about, kind of a lot to highlight as the storm comes Harvey, which is kind of a weird name. I'm actually from Harvey, Louisiana, but as it moves into the portion of the Gulf, we'll be watching it very closely. Everybody have a great night.